I had already won at life, but the system forced me to return to the past to save someone. My wife, Clara, calmly urged me not to give up, quietly packing a bag for me and promising to take care of our son. But I knew this trip wasn't just about placating someone from my past. It was about confronting the car crash that killed me 10 years ago, the obsessive man named Henry who was behind it, and Ava, the woman who had spent a decade searching for the truth. It turned out my death, which I thought was the final curtain, had never truly ended anything at all. After that mission failed, I chose death as my exit strategy to return to my own world. 3 peaceful years flew by, until one day, the system suddenly contacted me again. "Host, do you remember the mission we undertook 3 years ago? It seems your target has discovered the true cause of your death and is about to spiral out of control. We sincerely hope you'll go back, calm her down, and get everything back on its proper course." I looked at my wife, Clara, and our adorable son, my heart torn between 2 impossible choices. That day, I was soaking in the magnificent scenery of the Montana plains. Not far off, my beautiful wife, Clara, was watching our toddler son take his first clumsy steps. A few other tourists nearby sighed with envy. "Man, you've really got it made," one of them said. Graduated from a prestigious university, middle management at a Fortune 100 company, a kind and beautiful wife from a good family, and a healthy, happy kid. If the system hadn't suddenly appeared, I might have forgotten that part of my life entirely. "Host, have you been well these past few years?" Its voice asked, sounding hesitant, as if it didn't know how to begin the conversation. "So, do you remember the mission from 3 years ago? You chose to leave that world through death, and in doing so, you became the target's unforgettable first love. For years, she's been investigating the truth behind your death, and it seems she's recently found a real lead. Things have gotten complicated. Her mental state is deteriorating, and she's even started self-harming. So, could you please help us with one last task? It's just for 1 month. After that, no matter the outcome, we'll bring you right back to your world and never bother you again." I looked down. If she's going crazy, she can make an appointment with a psychiatrist. "I'm not a doctor," the system retorted, "but she's like this entirely because of you. Don't you feel even a little bit sorry for her?" Hearing the system say Ava had lost her mind, I scoffed. "You know how ugly it was when I left." I told her to her face I couldn't go on living, and she didn't even pause for a second before walking away. I was her doormat, an idiot at her beck and call. One time she casually mentioned she was craving dumplings, so I ran out in a torrential downpour to get them for her. She didn't even wait for me to return. Instead, she got into Henry's car and went with him to a fancy downtown restaurant. I stood there by the entrance for what felt like an eternity, holding the box of hot dumplings, waiting for her. When she finally came out, her expression shifted from surprise to pure annoyance. "James, what are you doing here?" she snapped. Her eyes flicked to the box in my hands, and she frowned. "You actually went and bought them?" "I was just making small talk. It's not like I was dying to have them." She glanced back at the elegant, quiet restaurant. "Don't you think a place like that is a little more my style?" she said coolly. She left without another look in my direction. And now the system was telling me she was losing her mind over me. Maybe the sarcastic smirk on my face set the system off, because its voice suddenly became rapid and agitated. "Have you forgotten that you too have a child?" At the thought of him, my grip on my phone tightened. Back when I was on the mission, Ava was the story's vicious female antagonist, obsessively chasing after Henry. She and Henry were childhood sweethearts. The Hamiltons and the Fitzgeralds had arranged their engagement when they were just kids and had even thrown a party to celebrate it. A handsome man and a beautiful woman from perfectly matched families. They seemed like a match made in heaven. That is, until Roxana showed up. Henry fell for her, hook, line, and sinker. To be with Roxana, he defied his family, broke off the engagement, and even gave up his inheritance to run away with her overseas. By the time I arrived in that world, Ava was already the notorious villainess, despised by everyone. I was the one who guided her, step by step, pulling her out of that darkness and helping her find redemption. Things progressed naturally from there. We moved in together, started planning a future, got married, and had our son, Kevin. During that time, I was genuinely excited about our life and even considered staying in that world for good, to be with them forever. But just after Kevin's first birthday, Henry, the man who had run off with Roxana, came back. The Fitzgeralds had cut him off completely. The pampered heir couldn't maintain his lifestyle without the family fortune. He and Roxana fought constantly over trivial things like groceries and rent. After one particularly bad fight, Henry left Roxana and came straight back to Ava. It happened to be my birthday. Ava and I had planned a quiet celebration at home, just the three of us. I ended up waiting from 6 p.m. until 2 a.m. for her to come home. The moment she walked through the door, I knew she'd gone to get Henry. I'd accidentally overheard one of their phone calls before. Henry had said, "Ava, we grew up together. How could I possibly not have feelings for you?" Her eyes had been red-rimmed then, like she was clinging to a lifeline. And once again, she had chosen him and left me behind. That's right, once again. This same drama had played out dozens of times over the last 5 years. I was the only one who knew that Henry and Roxana would never really be over. And I was the only one willing to wait right there for Ava to come back to me, time and time again. When she came in that night, she froze for a second, seeing the cold dinner and the untouched birthday cake on the table. She didn't say a word. She just carefully carried a sleeping Kevin to his room and tucked him in. Only then did she come back out and whisper, "I'm sorry, James. Happy birthday. I was so busy today, it just slipped my mind. I'll get you a gift tomorrow to make up for it." "Okay." I shook my head. "Don't bother. My birthday's over. I don't need a gift anymore." Around that time, I felt trapped in a vicious cycle I couldn't escape. I tried desperately to be good to Ava, with the same intensity as when we first met. I didn't want to watch her self-destruct, and I wasn't ready to lose her. She was with Henry almost every day, in and out of the office together, then talking about business deals late into the night. Finally, one day, I couldn't take it anymore and exploded. "Ava, do you have any conscience at all?" Ava had never seen me lose control like that. She took a step back, her face a mask of irritation. "James, can you stop being so dramatic? Don't read so much into it. I've known Henry for over 20 years. I'm just helping him get back on his feet with the Fitzgeralds." But just a few days later, she started taking Kevin to see Henry. The final straw was when Henry took both of them back to his place. Kevin, who was just learning to talk, toddled over to Henry and said, in his little voice, "Daddy." And he wasn't calling for me. He was calling for Henry. It was the first time Kevin had ever said the word daddy, and he said it to the man who had spent his life looking down on me. With Ava's help, it took Henry 3 years to firmly reestablish his position within the Fitzgerald family. During those 3 years, Henry, Ava, and Kevin looked more like a family than I ever did with them. They celebrated holidays together, had birthday parties, and exchanged gifts. Kevin even affectionately called him Daddy Henry. But our son was over 4 years old and had never once called me Daddy. Every time I tried to correct him, Ava would intervene. "He's just a kid, James. Why are you pressuring him?" Then Kevin would say something even worse. "I like Daddy Henry. I don't like you. I don't want you to be my daddy." Then came the day Ava decided she and Kevin were going on a trip with Henry. I made one last attempt to stop her, my eyes filled with tears as I stared at her. "Ava," I pleaded, "if you go to him now, I honestly don't think I can go on. Even if it comes to that, will you still choose him?" But Ava wasn't really listening. She just thought I was trying to manipulate her with threats. Her eyes were filled with irritation and impatience. "James, I was never that into you," she said flatly. "You know that. I was never that into you. Not from the beginning." I watched her turn and walk away, feeling completely hollowed out inside. I managed to whisper, "Goodbye." She heard me. Her pace faltered for just a second, but then she continued on without a hint of hesitation. The system sighed heavily beside me. "Are you sure you want to leave this way?" it asked. But my mind was made up. If I couldn't leave a single mark on her heart while I was alive, then I would use my death to burn myself into her memory forever. "At least for the sake of me pulling you back from the brink of death, you should reconsider," the system's voice echoed in my mind from 3 years ago. I hesitated. Back in my reckless youth, I was obsessed with extreme sports, constantly tempting fate. I almost paid the ultimate price. As I lay dying, it was the system that gave me a second chance at life. Even though I failed that mission completely and should have been erased according to the rules, the system took pity on me. It didn't delete me. Instead, it fully restored my physical body. The nurse who cared for me back then was Clara, my wife now. She always used to say I was a medical miracle. Eventually, I told her my secret, piece by piece. She was moved and a little stunned. But none of that stopped us from falling in love, getting married, and having our son. Now, caught between the system that had saved my life and the family I had built, I was completely torn. That evening, Clara noticed I was distracted and gently asked if something was on my mind. After a long hesitation, I decided to tell her everything. "Clara," I asked, "what do you think I should do?" To my surprise, she just squeezed my hand. "It's still alive, James," she said. "I don't think we could just give up on her." I knew she was saying it partly out of her trust in me, and partly from the instincts of a nurse. My eyes started to burn, and I squeezed her hand back. "Aren't you even a little scared I might not come back?" She winked, her voice full of a playful confidence. "We survived that. Of course I believe in you, more than I believe in myself." Our sleeping son rolled over and mumbled, "Daddy." I gently tucked his blanket around him, then turned to Clara and made a promise. "Don't worry," I said seriously. "I'll get this done as fast as I can. I know it's a lot to ask you to handle Leo on your own for a bit. When I get back, I promise I'll make it up to both of you." I had only been gone from my world for 3 years, but in the mission world, a full decade had passed. When I returned, Ava stared at me with an almost worshipful expression. Her voice trembled as she asked, "James, is it really you?" She gently pushed the boy standing beside her toward me. "Kevin, go on. Say hi to your dad." Kevin's face flushed red as he shyly walked over and hugged me tightly, whispering, "Dad." I had imagined this moment countless times, wondering how emotional I'd be when Kevin finally called me Dad. But now that it was happening, I felt surprisingly, almost unnervingly calm. I sighed, deciding it was time to be brutally honest. "Ava, I already said my goodbye to you the moment you walked out that day," I said. "I really did die. You saw the body." Her composure shattered instantly. "No," she screamed. "That wasn't you. It's impossible. Someone as proud as you would never accept such a pathetic way to die." Watching her completely unravel, I felt a pang of regret for agreeing to come back. Her condition was far worse than I'd imagined, even worse than when Henry had left her. You can think of it as me being temporarily resurrected or my spirit returning. Whatever you want, I told her. But either way, I can only be here for 1 month. I only came back to repay a debt to the system. After that month is up, I'm leaving, whether you accept it or not. I just hope you won't make this too difficult." Probably terrified I would walk out the door right then, Ava abandoned all her pride. "It doesn't matter," she pleaded, all sense of dignity gone. "Even if it's only for a month, that's enough, as long as you're here with me." Ava took me to her place, a spacious penthouse downtown with a view of the ocean. It was the dream home we had once planned together. She smiled, handing me a fresh set of clothes. "James, I kept all of your things," she said. "I never believed you were really gone." I held up a hand to cut her off. "How's Henry?" When I had decided to die to escape this world, the fastest way was to stage a fatal accident. I had chosen a car crash. But neither I nor the system had anticipated that the driver who hit and killed me would be the story's hero, Henry. His first instinct was to flee the scene. The system, of course, couldn't allow its protagonist to be branded a hit-and-run driver. With its invisible influence, the Fitzgerald family used all its connections to bury the story, finding a scapegoat to take the fall for Henry. A decade later, Ava had finally pieced together the truth. 10 years ago, I had died under the wheels of Henry's car. What kind of nerve must he have to calmly get his car repaired and carry on as if nothing happened, taking Ava on vacations? The system told me that over the past decade, Ava had done everything she could to uncover the truth, nearly getting herself killed by the Fitzgeralds on several occasions. And what price had Henry paid for my death, especially after Ava began to lose her mind and hurt herself? After I asked, Ava was silent for a long time, unable to form a complete sentence. I had my suspicions. The system said she was insane, but the moment she saw me, she became much calmer. Was that really insanity? The system's take was that she no longer wanted to live. But none of her attempts had ever been serious. What kind of death wish was that? The Fitzgeralds and the Hamiltons have been tied together for decades, their business interests completely entangled. Ava claimed she could never forgive Henry for hitting me. But when the Fitzgeralds offered 3 major business deals as a settlement, she chose to drop her investigation. "But you're back now, aren't you?" she said. "Can't we just live our lives peacefully, James?" I glanced down at my own form and let out a soft, humorless laugh. If I showed up in public looking like this, there's no telling what kind of chaos it would cause, especially for my parents in this world. I had to leave again in a month, and they had already accepted my death and moved on. I didn't want to disrupt the peace they had finally found. So, I rarely left the apartment. Sometimes at night, Ava would beg me to go for a walk with her and Kevin, and on those occasions, it was hard to say no, because the moment I said no, she would fly into a rage, pulling at her hair and screaming, "You already came back, so why are you still doing this to me?" It was only in those moments that I truly understood how fragile her mental state had become. To be precise, she wasn't completely insane. It was more like she had numbed herself into a stupor, as if that would make me forgive her past cruelty and her present, cowardly pragmatism. I always wore a face mask, trailing a half-step behind mother and son in silence. After a few of these walks, someone inevitably snapped a photo, and it quickly ended up online. Hamilton heiress spotted with mystery man. New romance? Cozy on the streets of Miami. The story started trending, and Ava's phone blew up. The most notable call was from Henry. "Ava, I know you're still upset about me and Roxana getting married, but I've already made Kevin my godson, haven't I? You know Roxana's health hasn't been good for years. She can't have children. All you have to do is say the word, and Kevin will be the future heir to the Fitzgerald fortune. You don't need to find some other guy just to make me jealous." To prove she wasn't still involved with him, Ava put the call on speaker right in front of me. But Henry's provocative, suggestive tone still made the color drain from her face. "Henry, stop talking nonsense," she said, her voice tight. "I haven't loved you for a long time, and Kevin will never see you as his father. Did I say something wrong? Weren't you the one who abandoned that weakling James and almost lost Kevin in the process? When James died, he probably didn't even know you were carrying his child." Henry let out a cold laugh, and his next words completely shattered my world. "Of course he didn't know. You had 2 abortions because you had no idea who the father was for either of them." "Shut up," Ava screamed into the phone, her face as white as a sheet. "What about you? You've been using me this whole time," she yelled back. "Yeah, I use you, and you use me." With the same, "Ava," he said, "get rid of that guy, or I can't promise I won't do something drastic." Henry paused, then added, "He's right there with you now, isn't he?" Ava and I exchanged a look, and she immediately ended the call. I slowly pulled my hand from my pocket. Henry had guessed right. I was standing right beside her, and I had secretly recorded the entire call. The next day, after Ava left, I took Kevin to school. He was 14 now. I used to adore him, but my feelings for him now were impossibly complicated. I couldn't love him the way I loved my own son, but I couldn't pretend he didn't exist either. Still, I couldn't make him any promises. I walked him to the school gate, and as his friends ran over, all their curious eyes landed on me. "This is my dad," Kevin announced, his voice loud and proud. Ava and Henry were nearly 40, while I was still physically 25. I looked young enough to be his older brother. Kids are brutally honest. One of his classmates thought he was lying and teased. "No way. That's your brother. You're not fooling anyone." "I'm not lying," Kevin insisted. "He's really my dad." I watched until he was safely inside the school gates before I left. But I didn't go straight home. I took a detour and bought a security camera. Before Ava got back, I had a technician come and install it in an inconspicuous corner of the living room. Knowing Henry, he wouldn't just ignore my existence. Between the blurry tabloid photos and the fact that I never left the apartment, he would quickly conclude I was Ava's kept man, and then he would wait until she was out to pay me a personal visit. He moved even faster than I'd anticipated. I had just sent the technician off when the doorbell rang. I glanced at the security feed on my phone. It was Henry. At first, he was restrained, ringing the bell politely twice. When there was no answer, he frowned and pressed a third time. After the fourth ring, he finally realized I was ignoring him on purpose and started pounding on the door. "I know you're in there," he yelled. "Open this door." While he was yelling, I slipped into a silk robe, leaving it open at the neck to expose my chest. I even rubbed a few faint red marks onto my collarbone for effect. When I finally opened the door, he was still shouting at it. "Let's see what kind of boy toy Ava's been hiding in here." I stood in the doorway, and he stood on the threshold. The moment Henry looked up and saw my face, his voice trembled. "You?" Worried he'd bolt before the camera recorded anything useful, I grabbed his arm and pulled him inside. "Mr. Fitzgerald," I said smoothly, "to what do I owe the pleasure?" Henry stumbled backward until his back hit the door, all his earlier bravado gone. He stared at me, his finger pointing unsteadily. "James," he stammered, "but you're dead. How are you here?" He shook his head violently, as if trying to clear it. "No, you're not James. I saw his body. There's no way he's alive. Who the hell are you?" "I am James." In this world, I was nothing more than a pawn in their game. My entire purpose was to save the self-destructive villainess, and, in doing so, pave the way for the main character's happy ending. But Henry's little accident killed me, and in that moment, he stopped being the story's shining hero. He learned to lie, to conceal, to be ruthless. He became trapped in a web of his own deceit. Even now, seeing me alive, he was terrified, but he still couldn't bring himself to say he was sorry. 10 years ago, I never got an apology. 10 years later, I was here to get one myself. I needed to make him pay. That was the other reason I agreed to come back. I was here to find out for the system if the man who had killed me would ever truly face any consequences for his actions. I smiled at Henry. "The name's James. From Austin. Graduated from UCLA. I'm 25. With every detail I gave, the color drained further from Henry's face. But when I said 25, he visibly relaxed. I'll give Ava credit. She must have spent a fortune to find a look-alike this good. He circled me, clicking his tongue. If the age wasn't wrong, I'd almost believe James really had come back from the dead. "Oh," I said, "sounds like you have a guilty conscience when it comes to this James, Mr. Fitzgerald." He scoffed. "So what if I do? The guy died under my car 10 years ago." The words hung in the air. He realized what he'd said, and his eyes shot up to meet mine. "Even if you're not James, you're a problem," he said, recovering. "I don't like other men touching my woman. You're only with Ava for the money, right? Here's $3 million. Take it and get out of her life." I paused for a few seconds after he said that and connected with the system. Is the logic of this world holding up? How has it not collapsed yet? The system's voice sounded a little sheepish. The author has been working overtime, desperately trying to cram in a redemption arc. I cleared my throat and looked at Henry. "Mr. Fitzgerald, you seem to have a lot of women in your life. As I recall, you just got engaged to Roxana last month." He shrugged. "Roxana is my fiancée. Ava is my woman. What's the problem?" I let out a low laugh and took the credit card from his hand. "No problem at all. But you'll have to give me a little time to disappear." I added, "I'll be gone without a trace within 2 weeks. I promise." Henry showing up to throw money at me was basically a gift. Watching him leave without a shred of guilt, I tapped the edge of the card against my thumb. 2 weeks. It was more than enough time to use his hush money to set my own plan in motion. If I tried to use the legal system, the Fitzgeralds had enough resources to make it all go away. So first, I had to drag all of his crimes, his entire ugly history, into the light of day. Let public opinion be his judge. Then, there would be nowhere left for him to hide. I just wondered what the look on his face would be when he finally realized I had set him up. A pity I wouldn't be there to see it. According to my deal with the system, in 2 weeks, I'd be gone. Ava suggested we take a trip back to my hometown, Austin. I knew what she was doing. She wanted to use my parents to trap me here. I leaned against the doorframe, raising an eyebrow as I watched her pack a suitcase. James, I've already arranged for Kevin to take time off from school so the three of us can get away for a while, she said. I took him to see your parents last year. They miss you so much. They'd be thrilled to see you. The way she doted on me now was eerily similar to how I used to chase after her. The role reversal was unsettling. It made me wonder if this was how uncomfortable she felt all those years ago when I was the one pursuing her. Kevin was running around the room, ecstatic about the trip. I sighed and finally said what I had to. I can't. I have parents in my own world, too. I can't just abandon one family for the other. Besides, I added, I have a wife and a son now. I'm not going to change my mind for you, or for Kevin. Her eyes immediately reddened, tears welling up. This time, her sadness was real. She was probably crying more now than she did when I died. That's impossible, she sobbed. James, you love me so much. How could you marry someone else? You're just saying this to punish me for Henry, aren't you? I can take back the deal. I can help you put him in jail, okay? Back then, I really had been madly in love with her. I had even considered abandoning my own parents just to stay with her. But that obsessive, all-consuming love had slowly faded away during my years with Clara. Kevin started crying too, tears and snot everywhere. I hate Henry. I don't want him. I want you, Dad. Please don't go. I'm your son too. But in another world, my own son, who had just learned to say Daddy, was waiting for me. I pressed a hand to my chest and took a deep breath. I wasn't made of stone. Their tears affected me. But I was certain of one thing. This wasn't about my old feelings for Ava resurfacing. I really, truly didn't love her anymore. I just wanted to wrap things up here so I could get back to Clara and our son. I pushed the suitcase lid closed. Ava, I said softly, let's not go to Austin. But if you really need this, the class reunion is in 3 days. I'll go with you. I paused, then added, as your partner. A week ago, Ava had begged me to go to this reunion with her, and I'd flatly refused. Now, hearing me agree, her eyes lit up. Okay, yes, whatever you say. Henry would definitely be at that reunion, and his fiancée, Roxana, would be right there with him. I gripped my phone tighter. This was one show I had no intention of watching alone. The next morning, Ava made breakfast. She just sat down to eat when she suddenly grabbed the trash can and started dry heaving. When she was done, she wiped her mouth and looked up at me. I had a piece of toast halfway to my mouth. I quickly put it down. Hey, I've only been back 2 weeks, and I haven't touched you. My comment made her laugh, though her eyes were still watery. Believe it or not, she said, I haven't been with anyone in a very long time. It's been hot, and I haven't had an appetite. I guess that's why I keep feeling nauseous and getting stomach cramps. I found myself asking, how often has this been happening? Ava thought for a moment. A few times, I guess. What? Did you pick up a medical degree in that other world? She joked. Maybe because I'd agreed to go to the reunion, she thought I was softening, and her tone was much lighter. I pulled out my phone and opened an app. I booked you a doctor's appointment for tomorrow morning, I said. Your health has been all over the place for years. It's better to be safe. Even then, my mind didn't immediately go to the worst-case scenario. After breakfast, I waited on the couch while she got ready. We left late, and by the time we got to the private room at the restaurant, the door was already ajar. As we approached, we could hear voices from inside. I hear Ava's got herself a boy toy. He's not a boy toy. He's just some good-looking guy. Good-looking, maybe, but can he compare to Henry Fitzgerald, our king of the campus? Henry himself laughed and cut in. Hey, take it easy, guys. My fiancée is right here. Don't you dare make fun of me in front of her. Ava had heard enough. She grabbed my arm and threw the door open. I could hear you gossiping about me all the way down the hall, she announced. If you have questions, you might as well ask me directly. I'll answer anything. The room went dead silent. Everyone stared at me as if they'd seen a ghost. James, someone whispered. James Miller. Henry stood up, raising his glass. Everyone, let's not get confused. James died a long time ago, and you probably don't know how horribly he died. When the car hit him, his entire face was destroyed. I heard it took the mortician 3 whole days to piece his face back together. His body was a mess of broken bones. He then pointed at me. This gentleman is also named James, true, but he's just a recent graduate. not an old fossil like the rest of us. It's only natural for a young man to look for a shortcut in life. Before I could say a word, Ava snapped. She slapped Henry hard across the face. Henry, what right do you have to talk about him like that? She seethed. She pulled me into a chair beside her, her eyes still locked on Henry like daggers. Don't push it. Seeing her fiancé get slapped, Roxana, who already despised Ava, stood up. What's the matter, Miss Hamilton? Did he strike a nerve? She sneered. Or perhaps you're just not used to being on the receiving end of a slap for a change? The old Roxana would never have dared to speak to Ava like that. But now, as the future Mrs. Fitzgerald, she stood tall, meeting Ava's glare without flinching. Ava had always been difficult and domineering. At this reunion, out of more than 30 people, not a single person came to her defense. I watched her, my feelings a complicated mix. She nervously tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I know I was a real bitch back then, she mumbled. Most of the people in that room had been on the receiving end of her wrath at some point. I finally spoke up. I don't know who Ava might have pissed off in the past, I said, my voice calm. But I do know one thing. You don't speak ill of the dead. And by the way, Mr. Fitzgerald, I continued, it's been so long since you graduated, you must have forgotten everything you learned in ethics class. As for that horrific accident you described in such vivid detail, it almost sounds like you were an eyewitness. Or maybe you just have a special connection with the driver who caused it. Henry was stunned that I'd taken his money and still had the nerve to call him out publicly. He just stood there, pointing and sputtering. You. Midway through dinner, Roxana excused herself to the restroom. I made up an excuse and followed her out. As I brushed past her in the hallway, I discreetly slipped a flash drive into her hand. I suggest you find somewhere private, away from Mr. Fitzgerald, and take a look at this. On the drive was the recorded phone call, the security footage from my apartment, and a collection of private photos I'd paid a PI to take using Henry's own money. The women in the pictures were all different, but the man was always Henry. When we got home that night, Ava, who'd had too much to drink, passed out in her room. In the middle of the night, she started banging on my door, waking me up. I punched my pillow in annoyance before dragging myself out of bed. When I opened the door, she was practically collapsed on the floor. She was clutching her abdomen, her eyes wide with pain. James, she whimpered, it hurts so much. I had no choice but to rush her to the emergency room. After an ultrasound, the doctor's face grew grim. He immediately ordered a CT scan and a battery of blood tests, all marked urgent. 3 hours later, Ava was on M4. The doctor pulled me aside. The results are back, he said quietly. It's liver cancer. Our initial assessment is stage 2. There's still a chance if we begin aggressive treatment immediately. I stared through the small window in her hospital room door, watching her sleep. I couldn't process it. Doctor, she's not even 40, I said, my voice hollow. The doctor sighed. We see it all the time at this age. You young people think you're invincible. By the time her 4-bag was empty, it was after 8 a.m. The nurse had just removed the line when Ava tried to get out of bed. Kevin's home alone, she protested. I gently pushed her back down. I already called your mother. She's with him. Then I have to get to the office, she insisted. I kept a firm hand on her shoulder. Your father is there, too. She stared at me, then sank back onto the bed. Am I going to die? She whispered. Not necessarily, I said. It's stage 2. If you follow the treatment plan, there's a good chance of recovery. A bitter smile twisted her lips. Karma, she said. It's finally caught up with me. She tried to hold it together, but a moment later, she completely broke down, sobbing. Why is this happening? I'm only in my 30s. Kevin is still so little. I had no idea what to say, so I just gently patted her shoulder. Like I said, you're not dying yet. Wasn't it just 2 weeks ago that she was claiming she would die for me? When death actually comes knocking, nobody is that brave. James, she asked, her voice small, can you stay with me a little longer? I frowned and let out a long sigh. What could I do? It was pure emotional blackmail. On the 5th day of Ava's hospital stay, Henry and Roxana came to visit. Henry stayed in the room with Ava, while Roxana motioned for me to join her in the hallway. Mr. Miller, she said without preamble, name your price for the evidence. Istère de here. momentarily stunned. I couldn't believe that after seeing everything on that drive, her first instinct wasn't to leave him, but to buy my silence. You're actually going to forgive him? I asked, incredulous. Roxana's face was ashen, her whole body radiating exhaustion. What choice do I have? She said, her voice weary. I was young and stupid overseas. I lost 2 pregnancies. My health has never been the same. Henry's right. I probably can't have children. If I leave him, what will I do? How will you live? I countered. Any way is better than staying with a scumbag like that. Not to mention, he's a killer. I closed my eyes for a second. If you leave him now, he might be generous, give you a settlement to live on. But if you stick by him, you'll end up with nothing. Because I have no intention of destroying that evidence. And there was more. I had also tracked down the man who took the fall for Henry all those years ago. He'd been on medical parole for years, confined to a long-term care wing in this very hospital. He didn't recognize me, of course. The man had spent 3 years in prison, followed by 7 years wasting away in this hospital. For him, this place was more of a prison than the actual one he'd left. He was simmering with resentment. All it took was a little prodding from me, and it all came pouring out. He clenched his fists, staring out the window. The Fitzgeralds promised they'd get me out of here after I got paroled, he spat. But they went back on their word the second I was transferred. Of course they did. To the Fitzgeralds, a patient locked away in a hospital was far safer than a liability walking free. The only reason they'd gotten him out of prison was to keep him from talking. Mr. Paul, I said, did you know that the man who was actually driving that car is now the CEO of the Fitzgerald Corporation? He's worth hundreds of millions. Do you think he's ever once come back to thank the savior who took the fall for him? Paul's expression soured even more. Everything he has today, he has because of me. If he's worth billions, I should get at least half of it. I had to laugh at his absurd naivety. So, I asked, do you want a chance to set the record straight? I know you have proof, he said finally. Paul fell silent. He did have crucial evidence, but he'd been too afraid to use it. He knew the Fitzgeralds would have him dealt with long before he ever reached a courtroom. I slid a photograph across the table. It was a picture of me, 10 years younger. The reason you don't recognize me, I said, is because you weren't the one in the driver's seat that night. If you had been, you'd know my face. I let that sink in. My name is James. I'm the man who died in that crash. When Paul officially recanted his testimony, I had just 2 days left before my month was up. I contacted several of the Fitzgeralds' biggest corporate frenemies and sent them everything I had. The recordings, the videos, all of it. I didn't have to do anything else. The scandal exploded online like a wildfire. At the same time, Paul sat on the steps of the courthouse, surrounded by the 8 bodyguards I'd hired, and started a live stream. He told the whole story from the beginning, even playing a recording of a secret conversation he'd had with Henry's mother. He angled his phone, so the words Hall of Justice carved into the building's facade were clearly visible behind him. I'm heading inside to give my official statement now, he said to the camera. The Fitzgeralds might have the power to bury this whole thing, but I still have faith in the law. If this evidence isn't enough to make Henry answer for his crimes, then I want everyone watching to be my witness. The Fitzgerald family is the biggest poison in Miami. I watched the live stream from the hospital, glancing over at Ava in her bed. She just had surgery and was starting radiation, looking incredibly frail. This was you, wasn't it? She asked, her voice weak. I was quiet for a moment, then turned to her and smiled. He was the one who wanted to do it. The Fitzgerald stock was in free fall, and the Hamiltons was taking a hit too. But Ava seemed too weak to care. Kevin rushed to the hospital to be with her, his eyes red-rimmed ever since he'd heard the diagnosis. I was heading out to get some water when he tugged on my shirt. Dad, he whispered, can you stay? I turned and crouched down to his level. Kevin, I said gently, technically, we've only known each other as father and son for a little over 3 weeks. Just like you never really saw me as your father when you were little, I can't fully see you as my own son now. Because I have another son, my son, waiting for me at home. I don't know when Ava had gotten out of bed and come up behind us, but she had clearly heard every word. She said nothing, just forced a weak smile. Let's go back inside, she said. That night, Kevin slept in an adjacent room while I stayed on the pull-out couch in hers. The door was slightly ajar. I was just drifting off when I heard her voice from the bed. "You're leaving the day after tomorrow, right?" I murmured a quiet yes. I heard her let out a long, slow sigh. "James," she asked, "do you hate me?" I sat up, genuinely considering the question. I should have, but strangely I didn't. I suppose it was because I just didn't love her anymore. "Ava, you're only at stage 2, I said. "The Hamiltons can afford the best treatment in the world. If you fight this, you have a very good chance of recovering. And Kevin still needs you." She didn't respond. I lay back down, closing my eyes. A few moments later, a choked sob broke the silence. "James," she whispered, "I'm so scared. Can you please just stay a little longer?" "Ava, in a way, we saved each other. I only came back this time to set things right in this world." I continued, "You're scared because you've had it easy your whole life. You've never known what it feels like to truly hit rock bottom." "I have," I said. "I fell from a height that shattered nearly every bone in my body. And it was Clara who stayed by my side, day after day, and pulled me back from the edge of death. She's waiting for me now. She loves me, and I love her. We need each other." The day I left, the weather was exactly the same as the day I'd arrived. I helped Kevin get his backpack ready and walked him to school. At the gate, he hugged me tight. "Dad," he said, "don't worry. I'll take good care of Mom." I ruffled his hair and watched him walk into the school, turning back to wave every few steps until he disappeared from view. When I got back to the hospital, Ava's parents were there. Her mother saw me and instinctively pulled the blanket a little higher over Ava's shoulders. "You came all this way," her father said. "Aren't you going to visit your parents in Austin? You won't regret it." I shook my head. "They're at peace now. It's better this way." Ava slowly pushed herself up in the bed. She looked at me for a long time before a small, weak smile touched her lips. "James," she said, "you have to be happy." I nodded. "I will be. You too." When I returned to my own world, it was the middle of the night. I opened our bedroom door as quietly as I could. Clara was asleep, holding our son, Leo. I didn't even stop to shower. I just slipped under the covers and pulled them both close. Clara mumbled in her sleep. "You're back." I squeezed her hand. "You were sleeping so soundly. Weren't you worried I wouldn't make it back?" Clara rolled over to face me, planting a soft kiss on my nose, then my chin. "But you did come back," she whispered. "I always knew you would." My eyes burned. Under the warm glow of the bedside lamp, in our soft bed, our family was whole again, holding each other tight. This story shows us that no goodbye is ever truly the end. The hero's return wasn't about rekindling an old flame, but about finally closing the book on a past that had spiraled out of control. It's a reminder that the greatest redemption isn't found in fixing the past, but in consciously choosing our present and protecting the happiness we have with everything we've got. The real winner is the one who, after everything, still knows the way back home.